Am I the asshole for making a dairy cake with eggs? The writer had been invited to dinner, a warm, familiar tradition among friends where hospitality was shared not just through conversation, but through food. And part of that ritual, as it had always been, was simple. If you're invited, you bring something to the table. This time, the writer chose dessert. But there was a catch. Their friend made a specific request. Make sure it's dairy-free, because her daughter had recently cut dairy from her diet. A small detail, but an important one. The writer, considerate and eager to contribute, took this seriously. They went with a recipe they knew well. A tried and true cake. No milk, no butter, no cream, no cheese. Just a light, moist, perfectly spongy cake that had brought smiles before and was sure to do the same again. And it did. At dinner, the cake was a hit. Compliments circled the table, forks clinked against plates, and even the host was impressed enough to ask for the recipe. So the writer shared it, casually listing the ingredients until they reached the eggs. That's when the tone in the room shifted. The daughter's face fell. She looked stunned, then hurt, and without a word, she ran upstairs. A silence settled in. It was the kind of moment where you're left blinking, trying to piece together what just went wrong. Then came the question. Why did you put eggs in the cake? The writer explained. The eggs were essential for structure, for that airy texture everyone enjoyed. But the friend didn't look relieved. Instead, she insisted the cake wasn't dairy-free. Her voice held that quiet edge of disappointment, the kind that doesn't explode but lingers. Confused, the writer tried to clarify, there's no milk, no butter, no dairy products of any kind. But her definition was different. To her, eggs were dairy, because, she said, they come from animals. The writer challenged that logic, not rudely but genuinely puzzled. Then is honey dairy too? The answer, no, because bees are insects. At this point, the writer apologized. Sincerely, they hadn't meant to upset anyone. But the tension remained. That awkward kind of tension that doesn't raise voices, but raises walls. Let's pause here. This situation isn't about malicious intent. It's about miscommunication, and more than that, mismatched definitions. The writer wasn't trying to be sneaky or dismissive. They were going by the standard, widely accepted definition of dairy, which is milk and milk-based products. And in most contexts, nutritional, medical, culinary, eggs don't fall under that umbrella. But the daughter and her mother had a different understanding, and whether or not it was technically accurate, their emotional response was real. Here's where it gets complicated. Emotions don't always follow definitions, and even if the writer was technically right, that doesn't mean their friend's hurt wasn't valid. Sometimes being right isn't enough when someone feels wronged. But that doesn't make the writer the villain either. They took the request seriously, made a conscious effort, and brought something they truly thought was safe and respectful. There was no sarcasm, no passive aggression, no hidden ingredients, just a cake made with care. So, am I the asshole for making a dairy-free cake with eggs? In the end, this isn't a story of an inconsiderate guest or a deceptive cook. It's a story about how easily misunderstandings can arise, especially when we assume everyone's working from the same rulebook. No, writer, you are not the asshole. But this moment, it's a reminder that even with the best intentions, sometimes what we mean and what others hear don't always align. And in those moments, empathy matters more than recipes. Am I the asshole for demanding that my husband and I go on video consenting to an open relationship before allowing one? Some stories don't begin with betrayal. They begin with routine, with love, with years. The writer, a 35-year-old woman, met her husband when they were just kids, 15 years old, high school sweethearts, the kind of relationship people romanticize. Two people who grew up side by side, who shared every milestone, every heartbreak, every transformation. They weren't just partners. They were each other's first everything. First kiss, first heartbreak, first love, first child. They got married at 25 after the birth of their daughter, built a life together through the chaos of youth turning into adulthood. Life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was theirs. And for a while, it felt like enough. But life has a way of testing bonds, and when children come into the picture, even the strongest relationships can feel stretched, bent, pulled in directions you never saw coming. Their daughter, now 10, was the first shift. The writer admits it wasn't easy. Sleepless nights, hormones, the slow unraveling of carefree spontaneity replaced by schedules and survival. But they adjusted. Then came the twins, 2 boys, now 6. Double the love, double the exhaustion, double the pressure. And through it all, working full-time jobs, managing student loans, saving for a bigger home, and trying to stay connected in the whirlwind. It got dark at times. The writer even wondered if they'd make it. But they did what people do when they still care. They sought help. Counseling, sacrifice, communication. Slowly, the clouds began to part. They got a better home, more stable jobs, hired help with the kids. Date nights came back. Connection crept back in. For the first time in a long time, writer thought, we're okay. But then came a curveball she didn't see coming. Her husband said he wanted to bring more excitement into the relationship. At first, writer assumed it was the usual, spicing up the intimacy, trying new things, rekindling the fire, and they did that. She was game, open, willing. But then the tone shifted. He started bringing up regrets, asking if she ever thought they missed out by meeting so young. Innocent questions at first, ones anyone might ponder. But layered beneath them, something heavier. He wanted an open marriage. That moment, that sentence, it broke the air. For writer, the idea didn't just sting, it gutted her, confused, hurt, even betrayed. After everything they'd weathered, 3 children, 2 decades of growing up together, surviving what many don't, now he wanted more. He called it ethical non-monogamy. Showed her articles, videos, case studies. Writer listened, but she wasn't sold, and he didn't stop. This wasn't a gentle suggestion. It was relentless. The topic bled into date nights, into their peace, their progress, their healing. And after a year of pressure just to quiet the storm, she said yes, with conditions. One of those, a video. A recorded, mutual confirmation of consent. Both of them sitting down, acknowledging out loud that they were choosing this path together. To some, it might sound strange, but there's a deeper wisdom in her request. See, writer had seen a story online. A woman in an open marriage went out with her boyfriend. Someone from her husband's family saw her, took photos, and publicly humiliated her, accusing her of cheating. And when the storm came, her husband went silent. Let her take the fall, left her out in the cold. Writer vowed never to end up like that. She wanted accountability, proof, protection, not just from her husband's doubt, but from the world's judgment. But her husband, he laughed, said it was paranoid, said no one else should be in their relationship, which, let's be real, is ironic when you're asking to open it to other people. She stood her ground, no video, no open relationship. Now he's calling her selfish, unreasonable, unwilling to compromise. And so she's asking, am I the asshole? Let's talk about it. This isn't just about polyamory or monogamy. It's about trust, about safety, about not being gaslit out of your boundaries. The writer isn't trying to trap her husband. She's trying to create a safeguard for both of them. Because the moment you invite outsiders into your relationship, the stakes change. People's opinions, assumptions, and judgments creep in. And unless both partners are on the exact same page with equal clarity, things can spiral fast. She didn't rush to agree. She didn't even want this in the first place. But she tried to meet him halfway. All she asked for was transparency, a verbal, mutual understanding that neither of them could later deny. And yet, he refused. Not because it was inconvenient, but because, deep down, maybe he wants plausible deniability. Maybe he wants the freedom without the responsibility. That's not partnership. That's a loophole. So, am I the asshole for demanding that my husband and I go on video consenting to an open relationship before allowing one? Absolutely not, writer. You're not paranoid. You're being cautious. You're not selfish. You're protecting yourself. And you're not unreasonable. You're being wise. If anything, you've shown incredible grace. You gave space. You compromised. And all you asked in return was for accountability. That's not a demand. It's a boundary. And here's the bottom line. No one should be pressured into an open relationship, ever. Not through guilt, not through silence, and definitely not without clarity. And update, ADA, for demanding that my husband and I go on video consenting to an opening relationship before allowing one. The writer returns, but not as the same woman who once stood on the edge of compromise, debating between her peace of mind and her husband's restless desires. No, this update is the voice of someone who has stepped through fire, been burned, and emerged with steel in her spine. After months of being worn down, of endless conversations that went in circles, of emotional exhaustion masquerading as negotiation, the writer gave him what he wanted and decided to divorce him. It wasn't some dramatic explosion that tipped the scales. It was one more argument, one too many. And when her husband stormed out in frustration and silence, leaving no clue of his whereabouts, the writer was left alone with fear gnawing at her chest. Was he safe? Was he okay? Was this the new normal? But fate, cruel, revealing, poetic, had other plans. While pacing the house with worry, her attention snapped to a pinging sound. A forgotten iPad, one still linked to his phone, blinking with messages she was never meant to see. And what she found wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. Months of inappropriate messages with a woman from work, some explicit, some mocking, jokes about her body, disgust, resentment, even cruelty about her decision to breastfeed their children. These weren't just messages, these were knives. And in that moment, the writer's heart cracked. Not because she still loved him, but because this man, the father of her children, had reduced her to a punchline in his private circus of infidelity and immaturity. The pain was unbearable, until her son woke up. A quiet, sleepy child asking if she was okay. And suddenly, the storm of heartbreak shifted. The focus sharpened. This wasn't just about a marriage anymore. It was about the innocence of their children, about protecting them from a father who prioritized sexual escapades over emotional stability. And when her daughter brought her breakfast the next morning, a little plate of toast, fruit, cereal, and a whole lot of love, it was over. The decision wasn't difficult anymore. It was obvious. That was the moment the writer knew. She was done. She would give her husband what he wanted, but not for love, not for understanding, not even for peace. She would give it to him as rope. And he was already tying the noose with every Tinder swipe, every late-night adventure, every photo and message she quietly documented. She handed him permission to open the marriage, and like a fool, he beamed. The attentive husband returned. The caring partner made a sudden comeback. But to the writer, it was repulsive. A pathetic performance from a man who had no idea the curtains were already closing. Because while he preened and plotted his new lifestyle, the writer was meeting with lawyers, researching state laws, planning every step like a grandmaster in chess. She's going to serve him hard, and when she does, she'll play the part of the devastated wife, blindsided by betrayal, victimized by adultery. Let him explain his way out of that one. And the twist? No one knows. No friends. No family. Not even him. Only her lawyer. The rest of the world still sees a wife reluctantly agreeing to a modern marriage, when in truth, she's already halfway out the door. And if that doesn't speak to a woman regaining control of her narrative, I don't know what does. So in the end, is the writer the villain for demanding a video confirmation before opening the marriage? Or is she simply someone who tried so damn hard to meet in the middle, only to realize she was being shoved off a cliff? Whatever your verdict, one thing's for sure. She may have lost a husband, but she reclaimed herself. And sometimes, that's the only win that matters. Am I the asshole for wanting a picture of my children without their partners? Here we have a story that on the surface seems simple, even innocent. A proud parent, a special occasion, a family gathering before the main event. And yet, what unraveled wasn't just a disagreement about photos. It became something much deeper, far more personal. The writer, a parent standing in the glow of pride, watched their youngest child walk the stage to receive a doctorate. That moment, years in the making, wasn't just about academic success. It was a culmination of childhood memories, scraped knees, bedtime stories, packed lunches, and hard decisions. It was emotional, it was monumental, it was a family milestone. And in the midst of that moment, the writer made what felt like a small, heartfelt request. They wanted a picture, a simple one, just their children, just the ones they brought into this world, raised, loved, and guided. Nothing dramatic, nothing professional, just a few iPhone snapshots before the festivities began. First, a photo of the siblings together, and then, of course, one with partners included. A before and after. a way to hold both memories, the children as they are now and the broader families they've chosen to build. But the moment didn't land that way. One of the partners took offense. Not quiet disappointment, not a calm conversation. No, it was an eruption. The partner stormed off in anger, declaring that while they once tolerated the writer, they now wanted nothing more to do with them. A switch flipped, a bridge burned. And in the wake of that outburst, two of the writer's children scrambled to protect the fragile peace. They warned, don't exclude her, don't upset her. She'll leave. Let that sink in. This wasn't a staged photo shoot. It wasn't a wedding. It wasn't a glossy holiday card going out to extended family. It was a casual, celebratory moment, a photo to freeze time, to remember not just the day, but the bond. Yet suddenly, the writer, who had done nothing more than ask for a brief moment with their own children, was labeled the villain. Now, the child whose partner lashed out won't speak to the writer at all. Radio silence. As though asking for a picture, one single moment of familial intimacy, was some deep betrayal. And here's where the heartbreak lingers. Because this wasn't the first time. This quiet longing for a photo of just their children has come up before. It seems like a simple ask, but the reactions keep turning it into emotional warfare. And each time it happens, the writer walks away not with a picture, but with pain. Let's step back here for a second. We talk so much about chosen families, and rightfully so. But sometimes in embracing our partners, do we lose sight of the people who raised us? The people who were there before the careers, before the milestones, before the love stories? Because the writer isn't asking for exclusivity. They're not saying partners don't matter. They simply wanted a pause, a tiny sliver of time, to see the people they brought into this world standing side by side just once for them. That isn't erasure. That's remembrance. But what cuts deepest is the fallout, the accusation, the silence from a child, the implication that this request made the writer seem like an outsider in their own family. And that's a sting that lingers longer than a photo ever could. So now we're left asking, was the writer wrong? Were they truly out of line, or did they just want a snapshot of love, one unfiltered moment of motherhood or fatherhood or parenthood preserved before it's blurred forever by tension and misunderstood intentions? Because sometimes all a parent wants is to look back and say, these are my children. This is where we began. And honestly, that doesn't sound selfish. That sounds human. So, was the writer the asshole? Or was this just another case of good intentions clashing with delicate egos and misread moments? Let me know what you think, because this one, it cuts close to home. Am I the asshole for telling my mom to F off because she told my wife she has BO while my wife was breastfeeding our daughter? This one isn't just a story about family, it's a story about boundaries, respect, and knowing when to draw the line. The writer, a 29-year-old husband and new father, has always tried to be respectful. That's how he was raised. Honor your parents, keep the peace, don't talk back. But sometimes silence isn't noble, it's complicit. The writer and his wife, 33, are in the thick of it, 4 months into parenthood. That hazy, exhausting, beautiful chaos where days blur and sleep is a fading memory. Their daughter, their world, was only 4 months old. You know the stage. Feedings around the clock, diapers, worry, love, pure devotion wrapped in sleep-deprived fog. And then, a visit. Writer's parents, both 51. It should have been a warm, supportive moment. Grandparents coming to see their granddaughter. A chance for laughter, maybe even a little help. But instead, things took a turn. Writer's wife had been running around all day. No time to rest, no time to shower, just surviving like so many new moms do. And in the middle of breastfeeding their child, a moment already vulnerable and intimate, Writer's mother looked at her and said, "You have BO." Just like that. No tact, no empathy, no awareness of how cutting those words could be. It wasn't just what she said, it was when she said it. Right then, while the mother of her grandchild was nourishing her baby. No one deserves to be humiliated in that moment. No one. Writer saw the pain on his wife's face. That flash of embarrassment. The look that says, I'm trying my best, and now I feel ashamed of even existing in this space. And something in him snapped. He stood up. Not just physically, but emotionally. This wasn't about keeping the peace anymore. It was about protecting the woman who had given him a daughter, who had been up every night, who had nothing left to give and was still showing up. He told his mother to leave his wife alone, but his mother, with the kind of cold certainty that only entitlement brings, doubled down. "I'm just telling the truth," she said. Then, worse, "Your wife stinks." That's when Ryder lost it. Not in a petty way, not in an immature outburst, but in a moment that came from months of stress, from watching his wife sacrifice her body, her sleep, her sanity, only to be humiliated in her own home. He told his mother to F off, told her to get the F out, and his parents left. Let's pause here. This isn't just about a crude comment. This is about how words can cut deeper than we realize, and how timing can turn a thoughtless remark into a cruel insult. Was there a better way for Ryder to express his anger? Maybe. But let's be honest, some lines when crossed deserve sharp consequences. Telling a postpartum woman she stinks while she's breastfeeding her child isn't honesty. It's demeaning, it's humiliating, and it's unnecessary. Ryder didn't flip out over nothing. He watched his wife, his partner, his child's mother be degraded in the most vulnerable moment in their own home by someone who should have been offering love and support. And still, there's guilt. That lingering, "did I go too far?" question that follows every boundary ever drawn with family. Because deep down, we all carry that conditioning. Respect your parents, even when they don't always respect us. So, am I the asshole for telling my mom to F off because she told my wife she has BO while my wife was breastfeeding our daughter? No, Ryder, you're not the asshole. You're a husband who chose to stand up, not just for your wife, but for decency, for dignity, for your daughter, who one day may grow up and see what it means when a man defends the woman he loves. Could the words have been softer? Sure. But sometimes softness doesn't cut it. And when someone comes into your home and humiliates your partner in front of you, in front of your child, the F word isn't just a curse, it's a shield. And that day, your wife needed one. Let me Am I the asshole for refusing to split a $1,000 birthday dinner bill evenly? San Francisco, a city known for steep hills, foggy nights, and let's be honest, outrageously expensive meals. And on this particular night, a birthday dinner was supposed to be the main event. A joyful evening, a table of 10 gathered to celebrate someone's special day. Sounds simple enough, right? But what unfolded was less a celebration and more a financial ambush. The writer, a guest in the city, showed up to support a friend, someone they cared about. They weren't just another partygoer. They were visiting from out of town. This wasn't their usual circle. In fact, they only knew 2 people at that table, the birthday girl herself and one other friend. Everyone else, strangers. And yet, barely moments after sitting down, a stranger made a bold move. One woman, not the birthday girl, mind you, took control of the table, flagged down the server, and ordered everything for everyone. No group consensus, no checking dietary needs, no asking if anyone wanted to split things up, just a full-on declaration that this meal would be family style. No opt-out, no negotiation. The writer, a pescatarian who also doesn't drink, had no idea this was happening until they tried to place their own order, only to be told it had already been done for them. Imagine the confusion, the awkwardness. Sitting there among people you just met, realizing someone has made choices about your food, your drink, your experience, and worst of all, your wallet. So they did what anyone with a spine and a bit of dignity would do, politely pushed back. They explained their diet, requested to order separately, and ended up with a $23 pasta and a $10 mocktail. Reasonable, respectful, entirely fair. But then the food came, and it was a feast. 2 giant meat and seafood platters, multiple appetizers, desserts, cocktails flowing. It was indulgent, excessive even. And as the writer looked around, they realized most people were not ordering conservatively. Most were drinking, eating freely. Some people even left early. One person didn't eat at all, just showed up for the vibes. And that same woman who had ordered for the entire table, she paid the full bill and took all the leftovers home. Every last bite. Days later, the birthday girl dropped the bomb. The bill was over $1,000 and each person was expected to chip in $150 $150 for a meal the writer didn't agree to, didn't eat, and didn't benefit from. Let's stop here, because what's truly galling is what came next. The birthday girl, clearly uncomfortable, offered the writer a discount, a compromise of $100. But even that didn't sit right, because this wasn't a case of someone skipping out on their share. This was someone being asked to cover other people's indulgences, lavish cocktails, expensive meat platters, dessert rounds. And all of it was built on a faulty foundation, an assumption that everyone would just split evenly. But let's call it what it is. That's not shared experience. That's subsidizing someone else's night out. And it's not just about the money. It's about the principle. It's about consent. It's about respect. Because when someone makes financial decisions on your behalf without asking, without checking in, that's not generosity. That's control disguised as convenience. Now, the birthday girl is upset, not because the writer was rude, not because they caused a scene, but because the numbers didn't add up, because her friend, the one who ordered for the group, is staring down a massive bill, because another woman left early and only paid for what she ate, because the whole situation spiraled out of control. And in the middle of it all, the writer is left questioning everything, questioning whether they were wrong to say no, whether standing their ground made them look selfish, whether offering to pay anything at all still wasn't enough. But what's most telling, the writer is the only one who offered to cover part of the birthday girl's meal, the only one trying to ease the burden, the only one showing actual empathy. That speaks volumes. This isn't just about a dinner. It's about how we treat people, how we assume things, how we forget that not everyone drinks, not everyone eats the same, not everyone wants to spend $150 just to be part of the vibe. So was the writer wrong? Or were they simply willing to speak up in a room full of silent wallets and loud entitlement? Because sometimes the most uncomfortable word in a group setting is no. And in this case, that no was long overdue. So what do you think? Was the writer the asshole? Or were they just the only person at that table willing to defend fairness over fake harmony? Because when did celebrating become synonymous with sacrificing your values? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my dad walk me down the aisle after he brought his affair partner to my mom's funeral? Sometimes weddings bring out the best in people. Other times, they shine a blinding light on the pain we thought we buried long ago. The writer, 27 years old, on the cusp of what should be one of the happiest days of her life, is trying to plan a wedding, a celebration of love, commitment, and hope for the future. But instead, she's forced to reconfront the deep emotional wreckage left behind by one of the ugliest betrayals of her past. Let's rewind. 7 years ago, the writer was just 20, young, vulnerable, and in the middle of watching her world fall apart. Her mother, her kind, selfless, radiant mother, was losing her battle with breast cancer. Anyone who's watched a parent die knows the kind of heartbreak we're talking about. It's not just grief, it's helplessness. It's raw, aching devastation. And while her mother was fighting for her life, enduring chemo, radiation, surgeries, her father was falling in love, but not with her. Not with the woman he'd promised to stand beside in sickness and in health, with someone else. Her name? Maggie. And the worst part? Her mother never knew. The betrayal didn't come to light in a quiet conversation. No, the writer found out at the funeral. The funeral. That sacred space meant for grief, remembrance, and closure turned into a silent horror show. Her father showed up with Maggie in tow, introduced her like she was just a close friend, held her hand during the burial. Can you imagine? The same hands that once comforted his dying wife now clutched another woman, right beside the coffin. Her aunt had to intervene. That's how far it went. Later, the full truth unraveled. Maggie wasn't a grieving support system. She was the affair partner. And it had started early, back when hope still flickered in the chemo sessions. And just 3 weeks after the funeral, Maggie moved into the writer's childhood home, into the place that used to smell like her mom's perfume and echo with the warmth of her laughter. Now, 7 years later, the writer is preparing to walk down an aisle, not to mourn, but to celebrate. to build a new chapter. But guess who assumed he'd be by her side for that walk? The man who shattered her trust. The man who tried to replace her mother before the grave had even settled. The man who rewrote his grief into romance and never once apologized for the wreckage he left behind. Her father. And when the writer told him no, that she'd walk alone or with her uncle, her mother's brother, he didn't ask why. He didn't reflect. He didn't own it. He played the victim. He said she was punishing him for falling in love. But let's be honest, this wasn't love. This was betrayal, deception, cowardice, dressed up as emotional complexity. And when she fired back, told him this wasn't about love, it was about his choices. He did what cowards often do. He made it everyone else's problem. He dragged the family into it, stirred the pot. Suddenly, the writer was being guilt-tripped by relatives who hadn't walked a single step in her shoes. And even Maggie, yes, Maggie decided to get involved. She reached out, claiming the writer was being spiteful and ruining a chance to heal. Heal? From what? From the affair no one apologized for? From the funeral hand-holding debacle? From watching her childhood home turn into a monument to everything her mom wasn't? Let's pause there. Because here's the thing. Forgiveness is a choice. Healing is a journey. But neither can be demanded, especially by those who did the damage. The writer isn't being spiteful. She's drawing a line. She's honoring her mother. She's refusing to hand the most sacred moment of her life, the walk to her future, over to someone who stomped all over her past. And yet some relatives are whispering, "It's been 7 years. Let it go." As if time erases betrayal, as if the wounds just vanish with age. But pain doesn't work like that. Not when it's never been properly acknowledged. Not when the people who caused it keep pretending it wasn't that bad. The writer's fiancé is standing firmly by her. And that matters. Because sometimes love isn't just about who we say I do to, it's about who we don't let in. So is the writer the asshole for saying no to her father? Or is she just the only one in the family brave enough to speak a truth that makes everyone else uncomfortable? This isn't revenge. This isn't bitterness. This is boundaries. This is grief turned into strength. Because walking down that aisle isn't just about arriving at the altar, it's about leaving the past behind. And some people, they simply don't deserve to walk beside you on that journey. What do you think? Was the writer wrong for protecting her peace and her mother's memory? Or was this her moment to take control of the narrative, the pain, and the path forward? Am I the asshole for reminding my dad's wife that she was supposed to be my mom's best friend, but chose to be the woman who slept with her best friend's husband instead? There's a particular kind of betrayal that words struggle to capture. It's not the kind that comes from strangers or even from enemies. No, this is deeper. It's the betrayal that only happens when the people you love the most destroy the very foundation you thought you could count on. The writer, just 17 years old, isn't asking if he's lived a perfect life. He knows the house is toxic. He admits he's contributed to it. But what he wants to know, what he really wants to understand, is whether he's wrong for holding on to the kind of pain most adults wouldn't even know how to process. Let's go back. The writer was only 10 years old, still a child, a boy who probably still believed in the idea of forever, in families that stayed together and parents who protected you from the monsters, until the monster walked in, not from under the bed, but through the front door. On the same day his mother was told she had a brain tumor, she found out her husband, her partner, her supposed safe place, was sleeping with her best friend. Let that sink in. A diagnosis that shattered her world, followed by a betrayal that broke her heart. Her name was Haley. She wasn't just a friend, she was her best friend, the kind of person you'd ask to be your child's godparent. The kind of person who shows up when you're too weak to cook dinner or too tired to fight anymore. That's the role Haley should have played. Instead, she slept with the writer's dad behind closed doors, and then had the audacity to try and force forgiveness while the woman she betrayed was having seizures and fighting for her life. 5 weeks and 2 days. That's all the writer's mom had left. That's all she was given. And instead of peace, she spent those last weeks in the middle of a living nightmare, her body failing her, her heart shattering. And the two people who betrayed her, the man she married and the friend she trusted, hovering around like they were the victims. After she died, her children, the writer and his little sister, were told they had to move forward, that this new family unit would heal, that they could build something from the rubble. Haley and Dad moved in together. They decided they'd raise the kids. But kids aren't stupid. They don't just forget. And the writer, he fought back. He refused to accept this forced picture-perfect narrative. He yelled, he acted out, he made sure everyone, friends, neighbors, extended family, knew the truth, that this wasn't some tragic love story. This was betrayal, plain and raw. He interrupted their wedding. He rebelled in therapy. And when they had 2 new children, he stayed emotionally distant. He made it crystal clear that he didn't accept this version of life they were trying to sell him. And Haley, every time she tried to act like a parent, tried to claim any credit for his accomplishments, he reminded her of exactly who she was, that she was supposed to be his mom's best friend. That instead, she became the woman who watched her friend die with secrets in her heart and lies hanging over her like a storm cloud. Now, let's be honest for a moment. Yes, the writer lashes out. Yes, the anger still burns, and maybe it's eating him up more than he realizes. But can we really blame him? He was never given justice, never offered closure, and worst of all, never allowed to grieve properly. His grief was hijacked, packaged in therapy sessions and let's move on speeches. Meanwhile, the people who caused the pain got to rewrite the story. And when Haley's aunt died last week, she asked for help. She wanted the writer to step up to be the oldest child. But here's the problem. You can't claim someone as your child only when it's convenient. He reminded her again of who she was, of what she did. He said no, that he wasn't her child, and brought up the affair once more. And this time, Haley broke down. She said the guilt already haunted her, that he was driving her mad, that he was making her isolate herself from others out of fear they'd find out what she did. She told him he was bullying her and that he should be angry with his father instead. But this pain, it's not so easily split down the middle. The writer made it clear, he'll go after both of them. And until the day he can cut them out of his life for good, he won't stop. He even told her that after what she did, she didn't deserve a happy life. Then came the aunt, his dad's sister. She tried to play peacemaker. She said forgiveness wasn't necessary, but the public shame, the constant reminders, the refusal to let the past stay in the past. That was going too far, that the children Haley and his father had together might suffer from this endless war. So now the writer asks, am I the asshole? And it's not a simple answer, because this isn't about chores. It's not about yelling or rebellious behavior. This is a boy who watched his mother die in emotional agony and then was told to accept the people who caused it as his new parents, who was expected to forget that his mom died, not just sick, but betrayed. Sure, his methods are harsh, maybe even cruel at times, but the grief he carries, it's layered, unresolved, and still raw. No, the writer doesn't owe Haley comfort. He doesn't owe her a revisionist history, and he doesn't owe her silence. But maybe someday he'll find peace, not for them, but for himself. Because carrying this fire every single day, it'll burn him too. What do you think? Is the writer cruel for continuing to dig at the woman who helped destroy his family? Or is this the only power he's ever had in a story that robbed him of everything else? Let me know your thoughts. Am I the asshole for canceling a trip because my friend couldn't afford it? Ah, the great summer getaway. The kind of thing that lives in Instagram stories and group chats. Visions of golden beaches, overpriced cocktails, and laughter echoing down palm-lined boulevards. For the writer, a 20-year-old woman just trying to enjoy a well-earned escape, it started with a simple idea. A trip to Los Angeles with a close friend. Sounds easy, right? A little planning, a few bookings, some cute outfits, done. But nothing is ever just that simple. The friend in question, 21, had been begging the writer to go on this trip for months. The way she painted the picture, it was going to be iconic. Nobu dinners, jet skis on the ocean, shopping trips, clubs, the whole glamorous LA experience. Now, let's be real. LA isn't a budget vacation. Even standing in front of a taco truck there can cost more than a decent meal elsewhere. So the writer, assuming they were both serious, mentioned it was probably time to book flights. But that's where things took a turn. Instead of excitement, the friend looked confused, bewildered even. She told the writer she couldn't afford a $150 plane ticket and was expecting to drive the 8 hours instead. Oh, and by the way, she didn't even have a driver's license. So who would be doing all the driving? You guessed it, the writer. Now, here's a detail that hits a little harder. The writer has back problems, not the kind that's fixed with a good stretch either. The kind where 8 hours of highway driving isn't just annoying, it's physically painful. Still, the real shock wasn't even the transportation issue. It was what came next. The friend admitted, without shame, without hesitation, that she had just assumed the writer would be paying for most of the trip. Let that sink in. She assumed that since the writer had more money, she would be footing the bill for nearly everything except the hotel, which they had already agreed to split. And this wasn't just about a round of drinks or the occasional lunch. This was jet skiing, designer shopping, club entries, expensive dinners, the full Beverly Hills fantasy. And the worst part, she never even asked. She just expected, entitled, as if having a little more money means you're automatically responsible for someone else's vacation fantasy. The writer, understandably, was stunned. She told her friend the truth. This trip was her idea, and if she couldn't afford it, she never should have asked in the first place, especially not if she expected someone else to cover her fun without a conversation. And that's when the guilt tripping began. The friend flipped the narrative. Suddenly, she was the victim. She said it wasn't fair that the writer could afford to pay and was choosing not to. That somehow saying no made her selfish. And let's pause right there, because here's the thing. This wasn't about kindness or generosity. It was about expectation without respect. The assumption that someone's financial stability means they're obligated to bankroll your good time is not friendship. It's opportunism. Let's be honest, this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a window into something much deeper. The writer saw, maybe for the first time, that this friendship might not be as balanced as she thought. Because real friends talk about money. They make plans together. They don't silently plan to spend your wallet while you're just trying to spend time with them. So the writer made the call. Trip canceled. She drew a line in the sand, and she's being painted as the villain for it. So now she asks, am I the asshole? No, not even close. The writer is not the asshole for saying no. She's not the asshole for protecting her body, her finances, or her peace. That she's not the asshole for expecting a mutual vacation instead of a one-sided spending spree. Could it have been a tough pill for the friend to swallow? Sure, no one likes to face the reality of their own entitlement. But this wasn't a case of someone falling on hard times and asking for help. This was a case of someone silently plotting a luxury getaway on someone else's dime and getting angry when the credit card declined, emotionally and literally. So to the writer, stand tall. You weren't cruel, you were clear. You weren't stingy, you were smart. Friendship is not about how much you can give, it's about how much respect you share. In this situation, it had none. So what do you think? Was this an act of selfishness or just someone setting healthy boundaries? Let me know in the comments. Am I the asshole for calling my stepdad out at a family dinner after he lied about paying for my college? Graduation dinners, they're supposed to be moments of celebration, of recognition, of pride. A time to honor the years of sacrifice, the hard-earned victories, and the people who supported you when the nights were long and the future felt far away. But for the writer, a 24-year-old man finally holding his degree, that night wasn't just about achievement, it was about truth. And for once, truth refused to stay quiet at the table. Let's rewind. The writer's mother remarried when he was 10 years old. Enter Greg. Not dad. Not even a father figure, really. Greg made sure to keep that boundary razor sharp. He'd refer to the writer as her son, never his. That distinction wasn't just in words, it was in how he showed up, or rather, how he didn't. At 17, the moment of truth came. The writer, like many teens staring down college applications, asked about support, financial, emotional, any kind of buy-in. Greg didn't hesitate. He said, "You're not my real responsibility." Cold. Final. Dismissive. But life didn't stop there. The writer didn't crumble. Instead, his grandparents stepped in, his mom's parents. The true champions in this story. They paid for his education in full. The writer worked part-time throughout school, shouldering responsibility, showing up every day with grit that Greg never even tried to understand. There were no shortcuts, no easy way out. Fast forward to the graduation dinner, a table full of relatives, smiles, wine glasses clinking, and then Greg stands up. He lifts his glass, face full of pride, and begins a speech, a public performance. He says how proud he is, how we worked so hard to get him through school. We. And in that moment, the writer couldn't pretend. Not after all those years. Not after every tuition payment his grandparents made, every hour he clocked in after class, every time Greg stood by and offered nothing but detachment. So the writer asked, calmly but directly, "We? What exactly did you contribute?" The room froze. His mother tried to silence him with a swift kick under the table. But some truths are too big to swallow, he kept going. "Everything I have is thanks to Grandma and Grandpa, not you." And Greg, turned bright red, caught in the lie, stripped of the illusion. He fired back that the writer was ungrateful. But the writer didn't flinch. He answered with clarity, "No, I'm being accurate." And now, here we are. Half the family says the writer went too far, that he embarrassed Greg, that he should have let it go for the sake of peace. But here's where the real story lives. This wasn't just a graduation dinner. This was years of emotional neglect bubbling to the surface. Greg had no role in the writer's success, yet tried to rewrite history in front of everyone. He wanted the applause without the work, the praise without the effort. And the writer? He simply handed the truth back to the room. Was it uncomfortable? Absolutely. Was it necessary? Yes. Because too often, people like Greg skate by under the banner of family, thinking that silence equals forgiveness and proximity equals contribution. But words without action are just noise. The writer didn't humiliate Greg. Greg did that to himself when he claimed credit for a journey he never walked. The writer just refused to let the lies stand. And that takes strength. So is the writer the asshole? Not even remotely. Not even remotely. He's the product of real love from his grandparents. He's the result of his effort, and he had every right to protect the truth of his story from being twisted into a fairy tale for someone else's ego. Sometimes telling the truth is messy, but it's not wrong. So what do you think? Was this a harsh call-out or a long overdue reckoning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.